I work at a restaurant in a small town, and I've been locking up at the end of the night for over a year now. It's nice, easy money, and I usually get paid an extra hour while doing simple tasks like cleaning or rolling silverware. It's actually calming after a hectic night in the kitchen. I never check the bathrooms or anything before locking up. Usually the restaurant is empty well before I am finished, and I have a lot of time to myself. There's something so eerie about being in a restaurant alone after closing. What was once a bustling place full of people is now empty and silent. The sounds of the machinery kicking on can be heard across the restaurant. The sound of the ice machine dumping ice usually makes me jump. With the layout for the restaurant, the main light switches are on the opposite side of the restaurant from the door with the alarm. So I usually lock the back and front doors, and then turn off all the lights. Then I make my way through the dark restaurant to the side door, which has the keypad. In order to arm the system, all doors need to be closed, and there needs to be no movement in the restaurant. If there is an error, it will tell me the door that is open, or infrared, blank, in the area where the movement is. When I first started locking up, I needed the flashlight on my phone to navigate to the door, but now I know the layout, so I just walk in the darkness. For some reason, it is less scary just to speed walk through the dark than to have a dimly lit phone light casting shadows and reflecting off surfaces. I hate to say it as a grown man, the dark creeps me out. Tonight the restaurant had been closed for almost 2 hours. I mopped the kitchen, cleaned a bit, and rolled some silverware for the morning crew. I locked the doors, turned off the lights, then made my way through the dark restaurant to the door. I typed in the code, and I get an error. Error, infrared detected, dining room. I felt my stomach sink. I know I've been alone in this restaurant for 2 hours. I know I had just walked through that pitch black dining room. Just then I heard footsteps pounding on the tile, coming towards me from the dining room. I've gotten chills down my spine before when something creeps me out, but this was different. It felt like my entire nervous system was overloaded. I didn't even turn around. I just opened the door and bolted out into the parking lot. I didn't hear any footsteps behind me. I got in my car and peeled out. I drove down the street and called 911 and then my boss. I waited until they arrived before I went back to the restaurant. The door was wide open. There was no sign of anyone. Nothing was stolen. Nothing was broken. I gave a report of what happened, and that was that. The only interior camera that is pointed at the cash registers doesn't see into a majority of the dining room, but the exterior camera caught something that scared the shit out of me, and I will think about for the rest of my life. It captures me running out of the building and around the corner to my car. Shortly after I exited, you could barely see the elongated shadow of someone standing by the door beneath the camera, watching me run away. The person casting it just being out of frame, before turning the opposite direction and disappearing. Just seeing my terrified self running away and that shadow watching me do so. I've never felt so vulnerable. I'm not really a believer in the paranormal, but I just don't know what kind of sick person would wait in a restaurant for 2 hours after close. Not steal anything, just to scare the employee locking up. I know for a fact it wasn't any of my co-workers. Obviously, there wasn't much that could be done to find out who it was. Nothing shows anyone entering the building after close, and from what we could tell, everyone who entered that day had left. This event still has me questioning myself on whether it was a sick prank, someone mentally ill, or something supernatural. I worked the night shift at a crappy motel a couple of years ago. I remember having a job at a friend's business, and this place paid a few dollars more. As much as I liked my friend, more money was more money, and that was that. They weren't offended or anything, so it was all good. The first night working at this motel was really interesting. Being trained was pretty painful, as I'm sure any worker knows. The really difficult part of the job didn't come in until about 2 months into it. That was when I was comfortable enough behind the desk that I could do everything 100% on my own, and I got better at reading the different kinds of guests. What I mean by that is, I've developed some kind of sense for if they were going to be good or a bad person. Right away, I could tell you if someone was getting a motel room for a business trip or if they were doing it to meet a hooker. People just had certain tendencies, and with enough exposure to them, you can begin to see patterns. There was this one night when a man who seemed very sketchy came up to the counter. He looked very dirty. He also looks like he was on drugs of some kind, though I'm not sure. I could tell you which one. I very rarely saw anyone high or drunk, so it was just a little unusual. He stayed for a couple of nights, and he had some kind of problem with his room just about every shift of mine. It seemed a little weird, but I guess it is what it is. Every time I saw this guy, I got more curious about what exactly he was doing here. From what I gathered, he was booking a motel for a week and staying up all night. I assumed that he was sleeping during the day, but I can't really say with any certainty. I also noticed that he occasionally left the motel probably about 5 o'clock in the morning. How do you speculate about what he could have been doing? But there wasn't anything I could really do about it. I didn't want to ask him because, well, would you? So I just tried to calm down my own curiosity for a short period of time. That was when he came out of his motel room one night. He did his usual rounds of coming down and asking for more soap. I can't imagine why he used so much, especially because he still seemed pretty dirty to me. Either way, I obliged his request. He sat down in the main lobby for a couple of minutes, though. There were these waiting chairs that were always empty, and he sat down in one of them. He laid his phone down next to the table that was by his side. He got up and ordered something from the vending machine. He started just sitting there and eating for a few minutes. It was a little awkward, not gonna lie. For some reason, he randomly said, "Oh shit," and walked out of the room. I noticed that he had left his phone on the table. He had completely forgotten. It was a flip phone, so there wasn't gonna be any passcode or anything I had to crack. After a minute or two of him being gone, I let my curiosity get the better of me. I started snooping. I saw one phone number saved, and it was a contact named Darlene. They had an area code that I didn't recognize, and no, I'm sorry, but I don't remember what it was. I just know it wasn't from our surrounding area. They had the weirdest text message conversation I had ever read in my life. It was extremely vague, but I also kind of ominous. My mind instantly jumped to the idea that they were murderers or something. Bear in mind, I was reading these in a panic state of mind, so I probably didn't read them as thoroughly as I should have. The text messages did not have any time or date stamps, so they could have happened at any time for all I know. I noticed something weird about the text messages, though. He had texted her more times than she texted him. Whoever this Darlene person was started ignoring this guy. The last text message that I had read was the most recent one where he texted her asking where she was and if she was going to be showing up tonight. I think I only had about 2 minutes of looking at his phone before he started coming back. Thankfully, the chairs were around the corner from where he could have seen me. I was able to put his phone back down exactly where it had been, and then I went back to the front desk. He came back out and went over to grab his phone. I was assuming that he had forgotten it, remembered, and came back. He stood there looking at it for a good minute. I tried not to look at him and be too oblivious about it, but I was pretty sure that he could sense that something was off. He felt my anxiety, or at least I thought he did. He stood there with his back to me for a few more seconds, but then he did something that I didn't expect. He turned around really quickly. He looked right at me, and then started walking up to the front desk to speak to me. Keep in mind, this must have been at about 2 o'clock in the morning, and there was absolutely no one around. He started asking me how much money I made working at the motel. I told him how much I make in an hour. He even started asking me if I wanted to make more tonight. I didn't quite understand what he was getting at. He was a much older man, at least 50 years old. The last thing I was going to assume was that he wanted to have sex with me. After all, I was only 19 years old. He pulled out a $200 bill and put it on the front desk, and he told me that he would make it quick if I came up to his room. My mind made the connection, and I instantly felt grossed out. He must have seen the expression on my face change, and I told him that I wasn't interested. This is the point in the story when I started to really freak out. I didn't know what to do. He didn't like the fact that I told him no and offered $100 more for an hour. When I said no again, he grabbed me by my arm. It honestly shocked me a little bit. My entire body would have jerked away if he hadn't been holding me so tight. He then began threatening me and saying he can do whatever he wants with me for free if he kills me after. The panic sunk in, and I did the only thing I could think of. I screamed for security, and surprisingly enough, he totally booked it. He went right back to his room, and a few minutes later, I saw him leave the motel. He never has to know that the motel I was working at didn't have any security or cameras or anything else. If he had attacked me and done something horrible to me that night, there really would have been nothing that would have stopped him. I'm really lucky that I was able to think on my feet, because that may have saved my life. Back in my early 20s, I used to work for a relatively small security contractor. It was a privately owned operation with around 30 employees in total, so we were all pretty tight. We'd get a contract with a factory or shopping mall, and then it was down to us to sit in that factory for 8 to 12 hours at a time when the place was closed. So more often than not, I'd be standing guard overnight by myself, completely alone in a totally empty facility. In my 2 whole years of working security, not once did I see a single thing I could call supernatural. In my 2 whole years of working security, not once did I see a single thing I could call supernatural. I see a lot of nonsense stories about seeing spirits or hearing voices from beyond, and they make me laugh every time. Some of them are well written, I'll say that much. But anyone who's ever worked night jobs knows that it's not ghosts or ghoulies you need to be afraid of. It's people that are the real danger. So with that in mind, let me tell you about Pete. After about a year of working for the security firm, I was given the responsibility of training new team members. This meant more money, but it also meant I had the pleasure of dealing with some pretty unsavory potential candidates. So when my boss calls me and asks if I can meet a trainee at some faraway site at 5 in the morning, I wasn't entirely thrilled. But still, I accepted. Such an early call meant a few hours of double pay, and that is not something I could have turned down. The following morning, I rock up to the parking lot of this large factory complex, still nursing the flask of coffee that had been keeping me warm on what turned out to be a frigid Michigan morning. It's about 4:45 in the morning, and I'm still half asleep. So I step out of the car to smoke while I wait for the new guy to show up. I'm not waiting for long when a car pulls up, so I assume this is the trainee and start walking towards the car as it slows down in the lot. That's when the engine of the car revs wildly and it takes off again. Obviously, I'm a little startled by this, so I just kind of stand there, watching in wonder as this car begins to kind of circle the parking lot, driving erratically the whole time. This is the guy I'm going to train? Some twitchy goddamn tweaker who's never going to pass the probation period? Great. I finish my smoke as the car finally comes back around and parks up not far from where I'm standing. But the driver doesn't get out. He just stares at me from his seat, eyeing me suspiciously as I'm just sort of staring back with this confused look on my face. That's when I notice the two kids in the back seat, no older than 10 or 11, and I really start to wonder what's going on. It dawns on me that this isn't just any old trainee, not at all. This is Pete. Pete is super rough looking, like he'd been a coal miner and a heavy smoker since a single-digit age. His clothes and mannerisms placed him in his mid-30s, but the guy didn't look a day younger than 50. God knows what sort of things he'd subjected to his body over the years, but if I had to guess, I'd hazard it began with an M and ended with F. No taller than 5 foot, Pete was wider than he was tall, with a painful, crusty-looking rash covering large patches of his neck, face, and arms. He gets out of the driver's seat, closes the car door, then commences to speak. This place ain't easy to find. His voice sounds like gravel, if gravel could smoke a pack a day. He then extends a hand for me to shake, and when I look down, I notice he's missing 2 of his fingers. I try not to stare and simply return the handshake, feeling pretty bad for the guy even if he is kind of weird. The sympathy doesn't last long. One of Pete's younger kids open the car door and attempt to climb out of the car. The kid is also overweight, has a similar rash, but unlike his father, his face is entirely lacking in symmetry. I mean, the kid was hideous. "Dad, can I..." The kid begins, but Pete hears this and cuts him off before he can finish. "Get back in the car, Jacob!" He barked so loud and angrily that it practically made me jump. "Get back in the car! And don't you dare get out again!" I'm just stunned at this. I can't believe this guy is talking to his own kids like this in front of a prospective colleague. But no matter how much I initially dislike him, I still have to show him around the factory space and give him a rundown of his job description. So I'm pretty nervous as I begin to take Pete around the factory's perimeter fence, explaining the patrolling system we have to ensure any fencing or barriers aren't compromised. I show him all the emergency procedures we follow if a break-in should occur. All that stuff. When I notice that Pete smells really bad. It sounds mean, but I wasn't surprised in the least bit. I mean, since when does a guy look like that smell like goddamn roses? But it was the questions he was asking me that I found really disturbing. He asked me if I'm screwing any of the girls that work at the factory. if I can hunt on the grounds, that sort of thing. He also took a big interest in any violent or threatening incidents I experienced during my employment, pressing on the details, taking way too much amusement in some pretty harrowing stories. When we're done, he tries making small talk for, and I'm not kidding, about a half hour, just rambling on and following up with the same line of bizarre questioning surrounding my personal life. I immediately call my boss and tell him just how weird and sketchy this guy was, how it was nice of him to give the guy a break, but I thought he'd be a serious risk to company contracts. But my boss didn't want to hear it. For some reason, he was dead set on giving the guy a job. I wondered if we were even talking about the same person, and actually asked at one point if we were still talking about this Pete guy. That's when my boss flipped out on me. He told me not to question his judgment, and to be back the next day at 5 a.m. to carry on with Pete's induction. He'd never, ever spoken to me like that before. I'm pretty sure he'd never spoken to anyone like that before. Just who was this Pete guy to him? A friend? A relative? The drive back to my hometown took about 2 hours, and the whole time I'm racking my brain as to why my boss would defend a guy like that. There was no way I was going to call back and ask him myself, but there was also no way I was going to spend an entire shift with Pete that very next day. Scrubbing myself clean in the shower for like a half hour, terrified that Pete's skin condition was contagious. I mulled over my options. I decided to just bite the bullet and call my boss. After a long conversation, my boss conceded and transferred me over to a different site. I would never have to lay eyes on Pete again, but 10 years later, that encounter still bothers me. I wonder how Pete's kids are, and if they're doomed to live the same bizarre life as their father.